Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Friday, April 29th, 2022. If you have anything you wish to ask me, maybe you have an interesting observation or photo you'd like to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Or if you would like additional weather information, you can go online to weather.gov. And a point-and-click map comes up. This is the National Weather Service's interactive map that allows you to pull up watches, warnings, advisories, all sorts of forecasts. In fact, this Friday afternoon, a lot going on once again across the nation's midsection there in the continental U.S. We have tornado watches covering southern Nebraska down into Kansas and central Oklahoma. High winds extending from South Dakota down into West Texas and New Mexico. In fact, we have a lot of high fire danger. We have red flag warnings, Colorado, Southwest Kansas, down across Texas Panhandle into New Mexico. There is even a fire warning for the Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fires that are ongoing in San Miguel County in New Mexico, which is to the northeast of Albuquerque and east of Santa Fe. A lot going on, a lot of information you can find by going to that site. Well, here in Alaska, significant snowmelt continues across the interior, and we will likely see our first 60-degree reading at Eagle this afternoon. Already temperatures have been up into the upper 50s as of mid-afternoon. And along the southwest coast, an approaching occluded front from a low that's down in the lower Bering has produced a 71-mile-an-hour peak wind gust today at Cape Newingham. And a reminder for people getting out into any backcountry areas, the Chugach Mountains, the avalanche danger there remains high going into this weekend, so keep that in mind if you're going to be venturing out into the mountains outside of Anchorage, especially the Kenai Peninsula and around Prince William Sound. Still looks like now we could see temperatures cool down a bit below normal here for much of the state between May 5th and 13th, because at this time we're kind of at a peak of some warming that we've experienced. A lot of people enjoying that, the warmer spring temperatures and the snow melting off in many places. So up in Eagle this afternoon along the Alcan border, partly cloudy skies, 58 degrees, a few fair weather cumulus clouds. Tomorrow afternoon up there, they could see those cumulus clouds have a little more vertical development, but nevertheless, again, the melting continues across much of the interior along the Yukon River Valley. And further west, St. Paul, low clouds and a few light showers. Temperature there 37 degrees this afternoon. And looking at the satellite imagery, we have a ridge of high pressure that extends from along the eastern Arctic coast, along the Alcan border, right on down into the central Gulf. And this is allowing for rather quiet weather to dominate most of the interior and even in through portions of the Panhandle. There are a few lighter showers in the northern and central Panhandle, but further south down toward Craig and Ketchikan, there's definitely more in the way of some breaks and sunshine. You can see the occluded front lifting northeastward along the Alaska Peninsula, the brighter enhanced clouds there along the southwest coast. There can be some lighter precipitation, but some rather brisk, stronger winds. Gale force winds sustained with some gusts to near storm force. Those stronger winds will also be lifting up there to the entrance of Cook Inlet as we go through the late overnight and into Saturday morning. So there's the low this afternoon north of the central Aleutians and the lower Bering, with the occluded front arcing eastward from it. That low, the front will lift northeastward as we go through tonight. That's why there were such strong wind gusts today there along the southwest coast. And that low will continue to kind of sit there overnight into early Saturday morning with a ridge of high pressure in place there along the Alcan border. But as we go through Saturday, a weak trough will kind of set up there through east central areas into northwest Canada. And the low will transition and develop a secondary low out of the North Pacific up into the southwestern Gulf by Saturday afternoon. And that low will continue to just kind of sit and weaken a bit by Sunday and be located just east of Kodiak Island. And then another low that's well southwest of the western Berings today will emerge and pass just south of the central Aleutians as we go through Sunday afternoon. And then a weaker trough and pool of cooler air will brush there along the Arctic coast and north slope, with some lower clouds and a few flurries possible. Temperatures, the low temperatures for tonight into Saturday morning should generally stay above freezing across the Panhandle and much of the coastal areas of South Central. Interior South Central could see readings dip below freezing, but by afternoon Saturday, many readings where you have some sun will get back up above 50. 50s rather widespread, even 63 there at Craig on Saturday afternoon in the southern Panhandle. With the clouds increasing from the southwest, that'll cap the temperatures, especially from Anchorage westward. And then on Sunday morning, that'll help keep temperatures milder there along Cook Inlet. Some lows not getting much below 40 with the cloud cover coming in. And then also low temperatures above freezing, 30s to even some lower 40s there in the Panhandle. And temperatures Sunday afternoon across much of the area. A little cooler as we expect the next front to be working its way in with some showers there across the Panhandle on Sunday. In areas of the interior South Central along and south of the Alaska Range, including the Talkeetna Mountains and on over toward the Copper River Basin, could see some 50s. In through the north, coolest temperatures there along the Arctic coast, single digits to a little above 10 degrees. Otherwise, lows still dipping below freezing at night across east central areas along the Yukon River. And then Saturday afternoon, we expect temperatures to be well up into the 50s along the Yukon River on the north side of the Alaska Range. 20s, though, still below freezing along a good chunk of the north slope and northwest and north central Arctic coast. And then Sunday morning, we expect lows single digits, a little pocket of colder air coming in from the northwest off the Chukchi Sea. That will keep temperatures a bit cooler that way as we go into Sunday afternoon. Highs only in the teens to near 20 degrees, but we could see some 60-degree readings there at Fairbanks on up toward Yukon Flats. Temperatures even relatively mild all the way down the length to the lower Yukon Delta. And temperatures Saturday morning will generally be above freezing in the lower Kuskokwim and Yukon valleys with the cloud cover and the winds holding up. And then on Saturday afternoon, where it is not cloudy, as you go up the Yukon River up toward areas like Galena 55, McGrath, as you get up the upper Kuskokwim 55 degrees. But again, across the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures kept in the 40s with the cloud cover and the passage of that occluded front. Sunday morning lows generally near or above freezing in most areas, and temperatures Sunday afternoon should reach the 50s again across much of the southwest interior, 40s elsewhere. And a quick check of the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for May 5th through the 9th. Temperatures will average below normal, centered on the central interior and northern Panhandle. And as we go through May 7th and 13th, we expect temperatures statewide to average a bit below normal. And then precipitation May 5th through 9th may average a bit above normal, the east side of the state and Panhandle, a little below normal there in the southwest. And the similar trend continues May 7th through the 13th, with a little above normal precipitation across the east and Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's take a look at the flying weather. If you do have a flight planned this weekend, Saturday morning, there'll be an area of low pressure just on the north side, eastern half of the Aleutians, and then another area developing south of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific that's eventually going to ride northeastward up into the southwestern and western Gulf, just east of Kodiak Island on Sunday. Meanwhile, far north, there is a trough coming into the northwest coastal, bringing a pocket of some colder air. Otherwise, either side, high pressure over eastern Russia, and then another one out over the northwestern Canada, over the Yukon. And that'll be the general setup here early in the weekend. Saturday afternoon, we could see some cumulus buildups and perhaps an isolated rumble of thunder there, upper Yukon Valley near the Alcan border, 40-mile gold country. Otherwise, IFR conditions expanding there in the western Gulf, along the Kenai and Kodiak Island, as well as up there in the northwest along the northwest coast, and then back out toward the central Aleutians, including St. Paul and St. Matthew. And then on Sunday morning, we expect IFR conditions to expand in through the north slope and along the Arctic coast, with that trough extending through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence, and down into the central Bering. Also, IFR conditions anticipated there along the northern Gulf Coast, especially eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, east of Yakutat, maybe even on up into the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White. For Sunday afternoon, we expect IFR conditions to hold up there along areas of the North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, northern Gulf Coast, as well as the entrance to Cook Inlet in the western Gulf, and then back out through off the west coast, the Yukon Delta, and on up towards St. Lawrence, down through St. Matthew and St. Paul, and along and south of the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula. So for Saturday, we expect VFR conditions at Anatuvik, as well as Adigan passes there along the Brooks Range, and then further south and west. IFR, there's going to be a narrower sliver of IFR conditions, particularly on the east side of Lake Clark and Merrill passes for Saturday. And then Rainy Pass may see VFR conditions become MVFR during the day on Saturday. Further north central Alaska Range eastward, VFR conditions will rule at Windy, as well as Isabel and Mentasta passes. Crossing south through the Copper River Basin and over around Tanita, VFR conditions are expected as well. As we get down toward the Gulf, though, that moisture lifting north with associated weakening frontal band, we'll see MVFR conditions become IFR, especially on the east side, the east entrance of Portage Pass. And then over at Chilkoot and White, should hold on to at least one more VFR day there in the northern Panhandle for Saturday. And looking at the freezing levels for Saturday morning, the surface freezing line runs from the lower southern coastal areas there of the Panhandle out over the northern Gulf to across the Alaska Peninsula as it comes back toward the mainland, and then through the central Bering. Freezing levels are generally above 2,000 feet through the Yukon Valley in the interior, including north side of the Alaska Range, Brooks Range, bumping up to around and over 4,000 feet there, Yukon Flats along the Alcan border. And the greatest threat of icing will be associated with a frontal band that'll be working its way northeastward up along the southwest coast in through the entrance there to Cook Inlet into the western southwest Gulf, between 6,000 and 16,000 feet way down along the Gulf North Pacific interface, and 4,000 to 12,000 feet there across the southwest interior. And looking at the winds aloft, upper level, low pressure circulation, 30,000 feet at jet stream level, just north there of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, with a broad area of southwesterly winds, 60 to over 100 knots there, extending down to the Gulf and North Pacific. Anticyclonic jet max there through the central Aleutians, up to 155 knots there just south of the central Aleutians. 9,000 foot winds. We have a double barrel low pressure circulation, winds aloft, mid levels there, as high as 45 to 60 knots coming in the east side of the Kenai, as well as in the Alaska Range there, the western arm. And then bringing it down to 3,000 feet, we see that secondary low pressure circulation southeast of Kodiak Island for Saturday, with stronger winds in excess of 50 knots coming in there through the entrance of Cook Inlet. And this is going to translate to the potential for isolated severe turbulence there, western Gulf around the entrance to Cook Inlet back into the southwest interior, 4,000 to 6,000 foot level. And then also an area of turbulence possible there out through the central Aleutians between the surface and 3,000 feet.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. but threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time to look at our marine weather, and we start out with the sea ice edge, and the most notable thing is that we see a rapid retreat of the sea ice there across the central northern Bering and along the southwest coast. We still have areas of some shore-fast ice in place, but just be cautious as the ice continues to break up and melt off rather rapidly. Farther north, more in the way of ice cover along the far northern Arctic coast. There are some polynyas that have opened, especially southwest of Utqiagvik down through Cape Lisborne and down west of Kivalina, also passing through the Bering Strait and on the north side of St. Lawrence. And we expect, again, the ice to continue to begin breaking up there in the far north. As far as the southeastern panhandle over the weekend, winds inner channels will be rather light, 10 knots, northwest to north there from Lynn Canal down through Juneau, Petersburg. Southeasterly, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, waves only a couple of feet. Outer Gulf Coast, 10 to 15 knot winds, waves 6 feet, but a bit stronger. Yakutat westward, 25 to 30 knots from the east-southeast. Sunday, as a frontal system approaches, that is going to bring windier conditions. The inner channels there, 25 knots from the southeast, 25 to 30 knots with gusts to 40 knots possible. Petersburg down toward Dixon Entrance. Outer Gulf Coast, southeasterly winds 30 to 35 knot gales, waves anywhere from 14 building as high as over 20 feet there west of Gustavus and southwest of Yakutat. For the northwestern Gulf, strongest winds Saturday will be between Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island up through the entrance of Cook Inlet, 45 knot easterly gales with gusts to 55 knots possible. And as we go through the middle upper Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots and easterly winds 20 knots with 4-foot waves in Prince William Sound. Sunday, winds come down a bit. Easterly winds still 20 knots, 4-foot waves there, Prince William Sound. Generally, winds out of the northeast, the length of Cook Inlet, 25 knots there up on the north end, but 35 knot gales from near Homer down through the entrance of Cook Inlet, and generally winds out of the east, around 30 knots there across the open waters of the Gulf with waves of 15 to 17 feet. On Saturday, Kodiak Island will see easterly winds to 30 knots there, Shelikof Strait. But as we go down the length of the Alaska Peninsula, variable 10-knot winds, lighter, kind of a lull there with a trough lagging back toward the west and southwest. On the Bering side, winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet. Sunday, look for a mix of winds there. Low pressure just east of Kodiak Island, north winds 30 knots, Shelikof Strait, turning westerly to 30 knots as we get on the North Pacific side, and then northeast to east winds 20 knots from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay, and waves 4 to 5 feet. The Aleutian chain on Saturday, strongest winds will be the western part of the eastern Aleutians into the central Aleutians, 25 to 30 knots from the west, waves 15, 16 feet on the North Pacific side. And then on Sunday, we have a low circulation in the region, and winds generally 25 to 30 knots, waves running 17 to 20 feet on the North Pacific side. Highest waves will be to the west and southwest of Adak in excess of 20 feet. Along the southwest coast, look for northeast to east winds, generally 20 to 25 knots. Again, the ice continues to retreat northward. Some of the shore-fast ice will continue to melt and break up. Easterly winds 20 knots, 8-foot waves St. Paul and St. George. Sunday winds will have more of a northerly component, 20 knots out of Norton Sound, 22 as high as 30 knots just south of St. Lawrence, and northeasterly 25 knots with 6-foot waves in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. George. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be southeast to east, 10 to 15 knots, turning behind a trough so that they'll be more northerly through the lower Chukchi Sea, and then shifting a bit to the northeast through the Bering Strait to 25 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. On Sunday, winds will generally be out of the northeast and north across much of the region, 15 knots, accelerating though to 30 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island, where any open water could produce some waves of 3 to 5 feet. And overnight, early Saturday morning, that low is passing just north of the central Aleutians. And for Saturday, we expect another low redeveloping southeast of Kodiak Island. And then by Sunday, yet another low will be approaching, passing just south of the central Aleutians as it pulls out of the North Pacific. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.